So I'm already in love with this comic. I really love this style. I love when we get to see the integrating of this. I like when we get to see like lawn patches, but it's like really easy to write. This is about Jefferson Pierce. It's called The Other History of the DC Universe, and it's looking and reframing especially marginalized people and superheroes and showing their stories in this. And it's so good, and I adore it already.
I went at her with a litany of how could you, how would you, how dare you do this to me. I was out there doing for my family, doing for our community, and she was going to take the girls and leave. When I finished going off, Lynn calmly asked how long I had been sitting at home before I even noticed the three of them were gone. I hadn't noticed until she called. I changed my tact. I set aside my anger, and I tried to explain that there were things I was dealing with that took me away from the home as a man, but never as a husband or a father. I had been secretive, even deceitful, but not unfaithful, never unfaithful. What I kept private for her sake. I couldn't in good conscience ask her to shoulder what I had been burdened with. Then Lynn told me that she knew I was Black Lightning. A wig and a mask couldn't disguise her own husband. She told me that she had waited for years for me to be honest with her and to lean on her and to give her the opportunity to uphold her vows, instead of marginalizing her day by day. But I had chosen to fight alone. Lynn told me that all she was doing was honoring my wishes. This scene, this artwork, my goodness, this is amazing. Like, dang. I really like the way that it's reframing this. And I obviously knew from the moment that Lynn appeared in the scene that they were going to get divorced because they are famously always divorced. I've never read a rendering of them when they are still together. Sometimes there's a little bit of flirty banter after because they tend to be a more amicable breakup after. But, like, they also are almost always divorced, and that's part of their story. And this is such well done. Like, I love this picture. Wow, it is like it. When I was starting, I didn't even realize fully because we've kind of been showing them dissolving. The more he's been fighting, the farther he's been away. But like Jennifer isn't very old at this point. This is just really, really well done, and like the writing throughout is really well done. But I appreciate the fact that it's like we're not actually having direct dialogue. We're having like Lynn told me. And it's like, I don't know, I really love the writing. I really love the way that he frames things and this scene specifically with the artwork and like the phone and everything that really stuck out. But there's so many scenes throughout that have really, really stuck out. The depiction of friendship through two coffees and a connection is so brilliantly done. Like, I enjoy the art so much. I also enjoy that it's pretty much like it is very much a graphic novel in the ways that it is. A lot of it is narration. Like, there is blocks of text, everything, but it's still so well done. But none of the rest had to carry around First Black as a permanent prefix. John's never ending battle wasn't just against the biases of the prevailing culture. Every day he wrestled with the sometimes unreasonable expectations of our own people as well. People like me. I'd been wrong about John. I had been so wronged. For years, what I took to be aloofness was just a guy trying to keep his head above all the assumptions that swirled around him. From distance, that came off as arrogance, but I never took a minute to consider John's struggles. All I knew, all I cared to be aware of, was that he wasn't living his life to my standards, so I had no interest in his concerns. When you can't see yourself in others, it's just bigotry by another name. I didn't like bigotry in others, and I hated it in myself. I apologized to John, but stumbled in explaining exactly why, for not being a better soul brother, for not doing more to help carry his burden, for thinking there was only one kind of black hero, and it was my version of it. John said he appreciated the sentiment, but it was just a form of pity, and pity was wasted on him. I hugged John. I offered him the fundamental human connection I should have put forth years ago. In that moment, he was not Green Lantern, and I was not Black Lightning. We were just two men trying to figure out how to get out of the shadow of our pasts and the burden of our race.
Vic? Why aren't you wearing pants? Why is it so tight down there? Why are there like fishnet metal things around your thighs? This is more than I ever needed to see of you, Victor. Love Cyborg. Don't want to see that much of it. So, I love this alternate cover. It is amazing. But it's a black label and it's 17 plus. Why? Like, we do deal with like John suicidal and like keep on trying to kill himself. And there's two uses of the F word both in the same sentence while talking about like police. But like this is it makes me sad that this is not just a general thing. Like, I do love black labels and I love the fact that they're normally like alternate world and a little bit darker, but like I would have loved this to be like a more mainstream comic. Not that the Black Label isn't becoming more mainstream, but still, I think this is beautiful. And I think that this is pretty much retelling based on what I know and I'm seeing of Outsiders and stuff like that. It's like retelling Jeff's history and without a lot of things. It's just highlighting it. So I appreciate that. I did think we were going to go into more of like the alternate history kind of bit, but I love that we're having kind of a look at his story and that the next issue I think is going to be about him too. Just super excited. I wasn't sure if I was going to look at different heroes or just going to look at him, but I'm really excited. This is a 5-star. Like I do not have any complaints other than the fact that like I think that there was a focus on him being like, I don't think that people are like victims of their environments or projects of their environments, like being all tough. But then he sees the guy who like he was like tough on and kind of ignored the bullying, ignored all of these things to toughen him up. And then later he sees him at a conference and he is a teacher too, and he's kind of ignoring him and he's like, why I like helped this kid and stuff like that. So I think that he's gonna realize in time that, his trying to toughen up guys because the world won't be nice to black guys isn't actually helpful in the end. And that we're going to see that. And I also appreciate that whoever the author is that I need to check because I didn't check it before I started reading. Rodney, I think something. Anyways, that he is not like making him better or he's not making him more like 2021 version of him. He's allowing his flaws and he's allowing how a lot of people definitely in the 70s would have thought about manhood and stuff like that and be a man. So I really, really love this arc so far. So even the last issue kind of ended as if Black Lightning's Jeff story did not feel like it was over at all. So I'm not sure if it's going to loop around and tell different stories alternatively or whatever. But this is about Karen Beecher, otherwise known as Bumblebee, and Malcolm Duncan, otherwise known as Guardian. And I really, really enjoy them as characters, the ones that I know from Young Justice. I haven't read any of their comics. So I'm really excited to kind of get a summary of their own things and hopefully know more about their origins and the ways that they started and stuff like that. So super excited for this. So even though this is majority text and it's very much like a novel with illustrations and stuff like that, it still does it so creatively and so in a way that is brilliant. This is telling backstory, this is telling a traumatic moment, and you can see the fist, you can see the way that it circles and trauma in this, and it's so well done in a way that like it's so much text but it's not hard to read. Like it is written in a really simple and yet readable way, and I really adore the style. I adore that they're going back and forth and they're telling the story and they're kind of like riffing on each other, and but there's also this love and concern throughout this in their relationship. I really like Karen and Mal and I'm really enjoying this. And again, showing the dissolution of a group through photographs. I noticed Wally and Dick first, but then you see Speedy, you see Roy, and you see Donna, and it's a lot, and it's kind of talking about how he's left behind and he's made to be a janitor and stuff like that. It's also addressing like Roy's drug abuse issues and stuff like that. And I'm not really sure what's going on with Aqualad at the time. They're like, Aqualad, he had personal problems going on, and I was like, he did? I don't know enough about Garth. I don't know enough about Garth to really know what the heck is going on. I also really, really enjoy the way that John Ridley manages to integrate current events of the 60s, 70s, and 80s into these works of period, because it can be really hard to sometimes do that in contemporary ways, and when they are, it can often come off as really badly. But when you're looking at historical fiction, you're looking at the ways that events like Reagan being elected, or Arthur Ashe winning Wimbledon, or all of these things that are happening in these periods and being able to integrate them with their stories is something, because it is influencing the real life creation of them and the way that comic writers and comic people would have perceived it, but it also perceives it and puts it in the context of its historical period. I really, really enjoy the way that Jacqueline Woodson begins her memoir, which is by looking at the way that she was born and what was happening to like Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all of these people during the time that she was being born and how that related to her. And she continues to do this throughout her life, because I might not, when talking about the very moment, talk about how a certain event will influence my current day, but it does, and the big events do. And sometimes big events to us are forgotten as we go on. But I really enjoy the way that when looking at it and looking at a retrospect, you can see how these events influence them. And it adds history to things like something people often like trivialize comics and things like that, and being able to add not only the story of these individual and at this version couple of Black heroes, but putting this into the larger civil rights movement, putting this into
what socially was going on in this period. So it becomes history as well as a general history as well as a history of these specific characters. All the jockeying among us to be the first Black hero, but the first of us never had the opportunity to really exist. I really love this because it shows the fact that so often we look at people who make it through, but we don't really show that they're standing on the shoulders of giants, I think is one of the quotes we often use to talk about this. And I really like this showing, we learn about Jefferson Pierce, we learn about Mal, and we learn about all these people, but let us learn about also the voices and names we shall never know because they were struck down before they ever had a chance to stand. So in history, it took 6 years from the introduction of Mal Duncan for him to actually suit up as Guardian or any other thing. In the first 6 years, he never had a code name and he never was allowed to actually do anything super heroic, which is really important because it put him at a rank below the rest of the heroes. It allowed him to exist for diversity, but it didn't actually allow him to be a superhero. It didn't allow him to be someone on rank with the rest of them. So for him to finally suit up as Guardian was really, really cool. And then when I was researching it, I was kind of confused because I thought I remembered Jericho, and I was like, how Jericho was Slade's son, and he's either mostly white or sometimes very occasionally Asian. And I was like, it's an interesting take for them to put him as a Black character, because not that you can't reclaim that or change someone's ethnic diversity. I think that's always great, but it's kind of a strange in this one that's historically about being the first Black character that you would give that to a mantle who wasn't Black. And then I did some reading on it and realized that Jericho was supposed to be Black in 1969 and it was vetoed and he was made a white character instead. So it's reclaiming the fact literally that when we talk about some heroes are never talked about, Jericho is a character, I guess, who made it, but he wasn't allowed to be Black. So not only is it owning and homaging the characters that are never known and the names that are never known, it's also the ones who were whitewashed, the ones who weren't literally allowed to know. And Jericho is one of those characters, which makes the homage to him even cooler and awesomer.
Karen is such a boss. She's like, you know what? My boyfriend is dealing with his crap and I don't want to. So I'm just gonna make an anti-gravity suit and kick their butt twice. And then I guess I'll become the first Black female superhero. Yeah, all's in a day work.
It's very interesting to me that Kara is such a huge focus, as they make note in both of these books about Kara's introduction. I don't know if it was the most massive thing ever at the time, but the fact that, no heroes that aren't Black really get introduced or referenced in this except for this, and then Kara gets referenced in both of them. But it's interesting to me because the first one, he's really just referencing that Jeff's yeah, so, I'm not really given the camaraderie or the focus and stuff like that. And yet she can just show up and, the man who is on his planet alone gets to have a cousin, and that's super exciting and stuff like that. But where is that extension given to me as someone who's been here the whole time? But this is looking at Kara, and Karen is really talking about how, why did he just drop her off and now he's permitting her? He didn't allow her to learn from Donna or from Barbara or anyone else. He really used her to his own ends, and it's looking from a feminist point of view. It's really interesting. When the Titans reformed and Mal got left off the roster, he tried to front things were cool, but there were no two ways about it. Malcolm was hurting some. I think the thing that was bumming him was that he couldn't get over what I couldn't get over was that we were happy for Vic Stone got to be part of the new Titans. We'd never met him or anything. He seemed like a good guy, but I just couldn't get over the feeling that the Titans only had room for one Black guy at a time, and this time Vic was it. None of us really understood loss before we'd experienced it one way or another. If you're going to put on a costume and call yourself a hero, then you're going to know people who end up dead. But none of us understood loss the way we did when Supergirl was killed. We saw loss visualized in the charred skin and rent flesh of a young woman who was supposed to be indestructible. We felt loss in the plaintive wail and in the piteous expression of Superman, who he found his cousin's body. Can you imagine living most of your life believing you are the last of your kind, only to find out there is one other, and she is your cousin, and you are charged with protecting her? Cal did everything he could, everything he thought was right to protect Kara, He gave her an identity. He raised her with values that he understood. He kept her hidden away from the world as long as possible. He was like a big brother who followed his kid sister around school, warding off any troublemaker. He was like a father sitting on a porch with a shotgun, waving away all suitors. No, I'm not going to speak for anyone else. I had stupidly thought Cal was being overprotective and chauvinistic. No, Cal understood loss on a planetary scale and just wanted to do all he could to keep it from happening again on a personal level. People would joke about how often she changed her costume like she was some kind of pop star diva. She wasn't a diva, she was just trying to find her own identity. Not easy to do when you have an S on your chest, reminds people of Superman, but no matter her age, they kept on calling her Supergirl. Cal kept on calling her Supergirl. He was not ready for her to be a woman. He was not ready for her not to be his protection, and her guardian, and her family. And with sad irony of life, the harder you try to keep your grip on something, the more likely you are to lose it. In the end, it is about them and not the journey, and they don't end up superheroes, which is interesting. Because I think that since the 80s, they haven't been as popular as superheroes. They've darted in and out, but they haven't been well known. And in the end, we see Malcolm not be the first of anything. And we go from him needing to be a hero, needing to be a hero, needing to be a hero, to accepting that, maybe in the end, being a good man, regardless of anyone watching, regardless of the first, still makes him something that's really hard and necessary. And they go on and they grow and journey over 15 years. And here they are. And in the end, Bumblebee, Karen, is hugging him. And as she's pregnant, she tells him that Victor will be the first Black leader of the Teen Titans. And he hugs back in a way that says, we got here collectively, even if I will not be remembered, just like Jericho was not remembered before, that he stands on my accomplishments, whether people remember him or not. And obviously, we want representation. We want, and this comic is specifically about bringing back voices that are marginalized. But I think that it is important. Even when Malcolm and Bumblebee are not well known, I don't think most people, even who read comics, a lot of people probably wouldn't know who they are. But everyone knows who Victor is. And that sadly representation comes in levels, and that it's a really moment of humbleness and stuff like that. And again, he deserves his respect, but also allowing them to be that it's hard to be a good man just as much as it's hard to be a hero. And that in the end, they watch so many of their people, including Jeff, we saw last issue, sacrifice his family's life, sacrifice everything. But in the end, what they chose was each other, and not striving to be good, but not striving to be a hero necessarily. All of that is past, and that's fine. The past is what brings us exactly to where we need to be. I really wish, while following Tatsu, that they changed writers, because even though John Ridley is a great writer, you can tell that he isn't writing from his own experience. When you were following Jefferson and you were following Mal and Karen, there was a level of intimacy, there was a level of experience and first-hand experience, even while talking about aloofness. In this, it comes off as very, this is what America did, and this is what it felt like, not this is the experience of mine. And they are writing Katana as a much more aloof character, which I don't know how I feel, as that goes into the stereotype of, either, and a woman of Asian descent either has to be, this, paper doll, or she has to be, this hard-as-nails person. But the art is really beautiful, and I'm enjoying it. I'm just not enjoying it the same way as the first two. I hated the way it implied they were somehow backup performers to Batman's leading act. Outsiders? Why not just refer to us as Batman, the Asian, the black man, the immigrant, the genetic freak, and the NUA? The whole concept felt paternalistic, colonial even. But I was the only one who seemed to be bothered by it. Especially in regards to recent events, I really want to give a trigger warning here. This is discussing violence against Asian people who are mistook as Japanese when they are Chinese. So this is dealing with real-life stories. Every time we have real-life pictures of things, in which of these have them, we see them in this red-orange color. And I want to read this out loud. The only thing was that Vincent Chin wasn't Japanese. He was a 27-year-old Chinese American. More correctly, Vincent Chin was an American. As an American, he deserved the same rights and protections as any other citizen and any other human. Unless apparently the other citizen was drunk white man with a baseball bat in his hand, a chip on his shoulder, and hate in his heart. There were two men, really, who assailed Vincent Chin. One held Vincent, and the other killed him with a bat. Both men were arrested. Despite the viciousness of the attack, both assailants were given 3 years of probation. They served no jail time. Were fined $3,000 and were ordered to pay $780 in court costs. In response to a letter of protest from the American Citizens of Justice, the judge in the case said, "These weren't the kind of men you sent to jail. You don't make the punishment fit the crime, you make the punishment fit the criminal." It should be noted that the judge in the case had served as a navigator for the U.S. Army Air Force during World War II. He became a POW in Japanese prison camp after his plane was shot down, which I'm sure influenced him none, as he absolved the two men of Vincent Chin's murder after paying a total of $3,780 as a reparation for his life.
I think that this end scene kind of illustrates what is missing in this thing, that, we're talking about her being an outsider and stuff like that, but it doesn't have the emotional gravitas that the other two end. Like, the ending of both of the others had me like emotional and a little weepy, and here we're like, yeah, you're an outsider and that's great, but it's like it's the statement without the nuance behind it, I guess, because we see her story but we don't see her thought process so much. Like, we get to find that she fights a little bit less brutally now, but yeah, I don't feel like I got to know Katana or Tatsu as a character very much. I got to see what she did. I got to see her go from, a mother to an assassin to a person who's a little bit more hesitant to kill. But I really like I think it's still a great book. It's just not an amazing book like the first two were. But the next one is about Renee Montoya, and she's great. She is, I think, one of the very first lesbian characters or queer characters at all in DC Comics, and she's Latinx. And then we're finally figuring out the last of this with Anissa Pierce, which is Jefferson's daughter, which is why we kind of had his ending less clear, because we're going to loop around to him in the beginning. But yeah, like, I really wish Katana had have gotten a Asian writer or someone who could write, because, like, this is specifically writing about Asian identity and about womanhood and like feminism and stuff like that. And it's not that, a black guy can write about that, but it's not going to come off with the same nuance as him writing about it. He wrote really great from his own experience, and he wrote a story of this, but it didn't have the passion and the nuance behind it.